Rain fell in soft, relentless drizzles, each droplet sliding down the black umbrella above me, mixing with the cold air that stung my cheeks. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, hidden beneath a hood that could not hide the tremor in my hands. The flowers smelled faintly of lilies and wet earth, and the air was thick with murmurs of sympathy I could not answer. My mother-in-law, Grace, stood at the pulpit with a mournful elegance, speaking of a life supposedly lost, a daughter-in-law whose presence had been a blessing. The casket before her was polished, gleaming, a cruel facsimile of the life that had been declared legally dead. And yet I was alive, watching, breathing, listening to every word, every practiced tear, every quiet sigh of grief she performed so flawlessly. My heart pounded as disbelief collided with rage, a storm I had to suppress to think clearly. My own death certificate, signed, notarized, and filed, was nothing but a lie. Everything I owned, every memory, every legal claim, had been funneled toward her, like water slipping through fingers I could not yet grasp. But I refused to vanish. I refused to be stolen. My name is Serafina Holt. I am 38 years old. And this is the story of how my life was stolen from me, and how I clawed it back, piece by piece, with patience, intelligence, and quiet dignity. This is the story of betrayal, heartbreak, and the calm, piercing justice that followed. Before the storm hit, my life was a canvas painted in familiar shades of comfort. I lived in Charleston, in a brick townhouse wrapped in ivy, where sunlight pooled on the polished floors each morning. The air smelled faintly of the nearby harbor, salt, rain, and the soft musk of old wood. My husband, Daniel, was the kind of man who made the ordinary feel secure, his presence a steadying warmth against the world. Our evenings were predictable, yes, but in their routine I found joy. We shared quiet dinners by lamplight, walked hand in hand through streets that gleamed under gas lamps, and curled up on the sofa with books that smelled faintly of ink and leather. My mother-in-law, Grace, hovered in the periphery, a smiling presence who baked pies, offered advice, and claimed a fondness that I accepted without suspicion. Her eyes always lingered a little too long on my possessions, a detail I chalked up to pride or habit. My work as an interior designer gave me freedom and fulfillment. Clients trusted me to shape not just homes, but lives, and I did so with devotion and care. In those days, life felt unassailable. I allowed myself to be complacent, lulled by kindnesses that masked deeper undercurrents. A misplaced checkbook or a late-arriving letter seemed trivial, and the occasional sharp glance from Grace I convinced myself was benign. I didn't see the subtle currents of manipulation, the way my comfort was being mined by someone I believed loved me. I thought trust was unbreakable, a constant in a world that sometimes seemed indifferent. Little did I know that the foundation beneath my life, the trust I held so dearly, was already eroding. The first signs came like whispers in a quiet room, faint and unsettling. Daniel began returning home later, muttering vague excuses about work or errands, while Grace's concern morphed into an intrusive curiosity I could no longer ignore. Her comments were laced with a subtle cruelty, hidden behind a veneer of care. "It would be such a shame if anything happened to your assets," she said one morning, her smile too bright, her eyes too calculating. Then the email arrived. I found it while sorting through my laptop, a message from a legal firm I had never contacted. My fingers trembled as I opened it. There it was, a scanned copy of my own death certificate, pristine, notarized, and horrifyingly real. My pulse roared in my ears. The accompanying instructions detailed the transfer of my property, bank accounts, and possessions, all to Grace. My hands shook as the room seemed to tilt. I confronted Daniel that night. "What is this?" I demanded, voice tight with disbelief. He looked startled, hesitated, and finally muttered something about an estate plan. I wanted to believe him, to convince myself it was a mistake, but the gnawing suspicion had already taken root. Soon, the pattern became undeniable. Calls from banks addressed to my estate, deeds quietly signed without my knowledge, subtle questions about assets. Grace was slowly erasing me. Each small act was a thread in a web of deception, and fear, cold and unrelenting, began to coil around my heart. The truth revealed itself one gray, drizzly afternoon. Grace was out, and I moved through the house with quiet precision, driven by a mixture of dread and determination. Behind a false panel in the closet, I discovered an envelope that seemed almost to pulse with the weight of betrayal. Inside were documents, contracts, and signatures that proved the unthinkable. Grace had forged my death, erased me legally, and transferred my life into her hands. Every document was meticulous, precise, and horrifyingly convincing. Notary seals, correspondence with lawyers, intercepted mail. It was all there, a tapestry of lies woven to remove me from existence. And Daniel, my husband, had not just allowed it. He had facilitated it. Every kiss, every whispered promise, every soft word of reassurance was now laced with poison. The storm inside me threatened to break me. But as the anger and heartbreak crashed against the walls of my mind, I felt a spark of clarity. They had underestimated me. They had thought my grief would paralyze me. Instead, it ignited a determination I had never known. I would not vanish quietly. I would not allow their deceit to stand unchallenged. I reached out to a forensic accountant, an old friend, explaining my concerns with careful vagueness. Within days, she uncovered minor inconsistencies, backdated documents, slightly incorrect signatures, and postal anomalies proving intercepted letters. Every flaw was a weapon. Every detail was a lever I could use to dismantle the empire of lies built around my death. With the evidence in hand, I began to craft a plan with meticulous care. The goal was not vengeance born of cruelty, but poetic justice, delivered with precision. Confrontation alone would not suffice. Grace thrived on control, on fear, on the illusion of omnipotence. I needed a strategy that would leave no escape, no deniability, no chance to hide behind false grief. The first step was subtle infiltration. I contacted a lawyer under a hidden identity, filing motions that demanded audits and scrutiny of every transaction linked to me. I leaked hints of investigation to banks and institutions, letting Grace's paranoia blossom as she began to suspect someone was watching. Each day, I observed her subtle unease, the way she checked her phone compulsively, the nervous glances at bank statements she thought I could not see. Next, the ultimate reveal, my appearance at the funeral, disguised and unnoticed. It was an audacious move, calculated to deliver maximum shock. Friends disguised as mourners would provide cover. Witnesses and legal experts would arrive at the precise moment to validate the truth. I imagined Grace's perfect act of grief shattering in an instant, her carefully constructed triumph collapsing. Every element of the plan required restraint. I had to suppress the tears that threatened to betray me, the trembling in my hands, the rush of adrenaline. Anger alone would not win this battle. Strategy, patience, and quiet resolve would. My revenge would not be violent. It would be absolute, undeniable, and moral. The day arrived with a soft drizzle, rain kissing the earth in quiet rhythm. The casket gleamed, the mourners whispered in hushed tones, and Grace moved among them with practiced elegance, her smile perfect, her eyes vigilant. Daniel stood beside her, a passive actor in the performance, while I lingered in the shadows, hood drawn low, heart thrumming with anticipation. When she began her eulogy, I stepped forward. First one foot onto the wet grass, then the other, a deliberate, measured movement that carried me from shadow into reality. I pulled back the hood. Silence fell like a physical weight. Faces froze, whispers ceased, and Grace's carefully curated sorrow twisted into raw panic. "I'm here," I said, voice steady, clear, resonating through the stunned crowd. "And I have every document to prove it." Behind me, lawyers and auditors presented the evidence: forged death certificates, falsified deeds, intercepted mail, proof that Grace had orchestrated my erasure. Daniel's face drained of color. Grace's empire crumbled under the undeniable weight of truth. Every action they had taken to claim my life was exposed publicly, irreversibly. The victory was quiet, surgical, and complete. No violence, no screaming, just the truth. Devastating in its elegance, leaving Grace to confront the consequences she had earned. With justice restored, my life blossomed anew. I reclaimed my home, restored my career, and expanded my design consultancy into a thriving business. The mornings were filled with sunlight spilling through curtains, the aroma of coffee, and the quiet satisfaction of spaces I had transformed with care. I embraced the opportunity to mentor young women, guiding them through the challenges of betrayal, resilience, and self-reclamation. Daniel disappeared quietly, leaving without confrontation, and I felt no longing for reconciliation. His betrayal was final, a lesson etched in clarity. Friendships deepened, trust was cautiously rebuilt, and I learned the exquisite freedom of living for myself, untethered by fear or manipulation. Every brushstroke, every new design, every step forward carried the weightless joy of a life reclaimed. Months later, Grace returned, her face pale, her hands trembling as she knocked at my door. Her apologies spilled out, rapid and desperate, words meant to erase humiliation, to buy back entry into my life. But I stood tall, calm, and untouchable. "Your apologies don't undo your crimes," I said softly, each word deliberate. "They cannot erase what you stole, and they cannot change who I am." Her protest died on her lips. I continued, voice serene and unwavering. "I've rebuilt my life stronger than ever. There is nothing left for you here, nothing but the truth you cannot escape." Without another word, I closed the door. The finality echoed, a quiet thunder that marked the end of her influence and the enduring sovereignty of my life. Betrayal may wound the deepest when it comes from those we trust most. Yet strength lies not in anger or vengeance, but in patience, clarity, and the measured assertion of truth. When we reclaim what is ours with intelligence and dignity, the satisfaction is complete, and the soul, finally, breathes free. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I would love to hear from you. If this story touched you, you can support me by sending a super thanks, helping me continue to share more tales of courage, betrayal, and triumph. On the screen now, you'll see 2 life stories I highly recommend, each filled with emotion, resilience, and hope. There's so much more waiting on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, where new journeys, heartbreaks, and victories await.